In this lecture, we will code the hands-on app project that we have been building up to using Python and Kivy. The first thing we need to do is to download the image attached to this lecture as a course resource, and then drag it into the directory that stores our Python file. This image is for the app's splash screen, and if you don't do this step, you will get an error when you try to run the code. We also need to make sure that we delete the example.kv file that we wrote in the last lecture, so that it doesn't affect the code that we are about to write. Up at the top of the program, we are going to have several imports to import the Kivy tools that we need. We will import kivy.app, then from kivy.uix.widget we will import widget. From kivy.uix.button we will import button. From kivy.uix.image we will import image. From kivy.uix.gridLayout we will import grid layout. From kivy.graphics we will import color, ellipse, and line. Finally, we will import window from kivy.core.window. Next, we are going to create some constant variables for our program. We will create a variable named red and set it equal to a tuple with the values 1, 0, and 0. Then we will create a variable named orange and set it equal to a tuple with the values 1, 0.64, and 0. Next, we will create a variable named yellow and set it equal to a tuple with the values 1, 1, and 0. After that, we will create a variable named green and set it equal to a tuple with the values 0, 1, and 0. Next, we will create a variable named blue and set it equal to a tuple with the values 0, 0, and 1. Then we will create a variable named dark blue and set it equal to a tuple with the values 0.29, 0, and 0.51. Next, we will create a variable named purple and set it equal to a tuple with the values 1, 0, and 1. Then we will have a variable named white and set it equal to a tuple with the values 1, 1, and 1. Finally, we will have a variable named black and set it to a tuple with the values 0, 0, and 0. After that, we are going to have some constant variables for the sizes. We will have a variable named small set equal to 2. Then we will have a variable named medium that we set equal to 6. Next, we will have a variable named large that we set equal to 12. The final two global variables we will create will be size and color. Our size variable will have a default value of small, and our color variable will have a default value of white. Next, we are going to create a class that will handle the logic for painting to the screen. That's right, we are starting off running. Let's use the class keyword and name our class paintWidget. It will extend Kivy's widget class. Inside of this class, we will define an onTouchDown function that takes in two parameters, self and touch. Inside of this function, we will type withSelf.canvas. Inside of the with statement, we will create a color and pass in asterisk color. Then we will set the diameter to size. Next, we will draw an ellipse that has a position with an xpos of touch.x minus diameter over 2, a y position of touch.y minus diameter over 2, and a size with a height and width of diameter. Then we will draw a line based on the touch with the points touch.x and touch.y and a width of diameter. Essentially, we draw a circle where the user taps. Then if they drag their finger, we draw a line in the same color. This is one of the ways that we simulate the draw logic of apps like Draw Something and Paint. Then we will create a function named onTouchMove that takes in two parameters, self and touch. Inside of this function, we draw the line as the user moves their finger. The onTouchDown function handles the user pressing their finger down. The onTouchMove function draws the line between the points as they drag their finger. Next, we are going to create the main class that will be responsible for handling the app logic. We will use the class keyword and name our class MyPaintApp. It will extend Kivy's app class. We will define the init function for this class. It will take in two parameters, self and asterisk asterisk kwargs. Inside of the init function, the first thing we will do is call the super function and pass in MyPaintApp as the first argument and self as the second argument. On this, we will call its init function with asterisk asterisk kwargs passed in. The next step will be to create a parent property and set it equal to a widget. Then we will create a red button that we will set to a button with a background color of red. Next, we will have a variable named orangeButton that we will set to a button with a background color of orange. After that, we will have a variable yellowButton that we will set equal to a button with a background color of yellow passed in. Next, we will have a variable named greenButton that we set equal to a button with a background color of green. Then we will have a variable named blueButton set to a button with a background color of blue. Next, we will have a dark blue button set to a button with a background color of dark blue. After that, we will create a variable named purpleButton that we set to a button with a background color of purple. Then we will have a variable named whiteButton that we set to a button with a background color of white. After that, we will have a blackButton variable set to a button with a background color of black. Then comes the buttons for the sizes. We will have a variable named smallButton set to a button with a text of S. Then we will have a variable named mediumButton set to a button with a text of M. After that, we will have a variable named largeButton set to a button with a text of L. Finally comes the saveButton, which will be set to a button with a text of save. After that, we are going to have a function that handles when the user clicks a color. We will name the function handleColorClicked, and it will take in two arguments, self and btn. Inside of this function, we will use the global keyword on the color variable. Then we will set color equal to the background color of the button that was clicked. Next, we will have a function that handles when the small button is clicked. It will be named handleSizeClickedSmall and will take in two parameters, self and button. Inside of this function, we will use the global keyword on the size variable, and then set size to small. After that, we will create a function named handleSizeClickedMedium that takes in two parameters, self and button. Inside of this function, we will use the global keyword on the size variable, and then set size to medium. Finally, we will have a function that handles when the user clicks the large button, named handleSizeClickedLarge. This function will take in two parameters, self and btn. Inside of this function, we will use the global keyword on the size variable, and then set size equal to large. Next, we are going to create a function named handleSaveClicked that handles when the save button is clicked. It will take in the same two parameters that our clickHandler function have been accepting, self and btn. Inside of this function, we will call window.screenshot and pass in the string for the file name, which we will call screenshot.png in this case. We need to create a function that will be called when the start button is clicked, so that it loads the main game level. We will use the def keyword and name our function handleStartButtonClicked. It will take in two parameters, self and touch. Inside of this function, we will clear the widgets. Then we will create a painter attribute and set it to a paint widget object. After that, we will call self.parent.addWidget and pass in self.painter. Then we will create a variable named layout and set it equal to a grid layout with 1 row, 13 columns, and a default column width of 50. Then we will call self.parent.addWidget and pass in layout. Next, we will bind the red button to the handleColorClicked function when the button is pressed. We will do the same thing for the orange button, yellow button, green button, blue button, dark blue button, purple button, white button, and black button respectively. Then we will bind the small button to have an on-press handler of handleSizeClickedSmall, the medium button to have an on-press handler of handleSizeClickedMedium, and the large button to have an on-press handler of handleSizeClickedLarge. After that, we will bind the save button to the handleSaveClicked function. Then we need to add each of the buttons to the layout using the addWidget function. We will add the red button, orange button, yellow button, green button, blue button, dark blue button, purple button, white button, black button, small button, medium button, large button, and save button to the layout using the addWidget function. Next, we will implement the build function. Inside of this function, we will have a variable named img that we set equal to an image with the source set to paintappsplashscreen.png. Note that this is the name of the image attached to this lecture as a course resource. If for whatever reason you change the name of this image, then please note that you will have to change this string to reflect whatever name you made it. We will also set the size property to a tuple with the values 875 and 622, the dimensions of our sample image. Then we will call self.parent.addWidget and pass in img. After that, we will create a variable named btn and set it to a button with a text of start, a size of a tuple with a width value of 200 and a height value of 80, a font of size 50, and a position of 311, 0. Note that this tuple is the XY position, so an X position of 311 and a Y position of 0. Then we need to call btn.bind and pass in onPress equals self.handleStartButtonClicked. After that, we will call self.parent.addWidget and pass in btn. Finally, we will return self.parent. Next, we will create an object out of our MyPaintApp class and then call the run function on it. The one thing we need to make sure of is that we don't have a dot button on line 98 after we type save button, or it will cause our code to run incorrectly. When we run the code, you will notice that the start screen loads. Clicking the start button will load the main part of the application. We can select a color and a size and use them to paint an image, write a message, or whatever else you feel like doing. Once you finish your picture, we can then use the save button to save the image. To find the saved image, simply open up the folder currently storing your Python file and look for the name that you gave it. When we double-click the image to view it, notice it is the image you created in the program. In the next lecture, we will learn how to build and export the app that we created to a mobile device.